The counterculture of the late 60s, comprised of hippies, became a widely prevalent cultural movement across the United States. Hippies were characteristically anti-establishment, anti-government, and anti-war, speaking, of course, of the Vietnam War. Although the argument can be made that hippies found solidarity through the Vietnam War, or their reaction to the Vietnam War, and the supposed rat race that was enveloping America, as to say the surrounding hegemonic culture, I would argue that the role of music, specifically rock and roll, played an equally profound role in the unification of the hippies as a legitimate group. Starting with the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, the California Rock Show hosted many artists whose music, in my opinion, epitomized the counterculture's frustration with the government, frustration with like social issues. One of the artists that did this really well was Jimi Hendrix. Hendrix's guitar playing was revolutionary in that he would purposely set his amp outputs as high as they would go to create a really overdriven tone. Hendrix also used feedback as another tool of musical expression, and his use of feedback as an art exemplified the larger thematic nature of the hippies' aims to reinvent the traditional. See, feedback was previously viewed as a mistake or something that shouldn't occur during performance, but Hendrix used feedback as one of the focal points of his show and became incredibly famous for it. One of the best examples of feedback at Monterey was Hendrix's intro to Foxy Lady, in which he would take his guitar and put it right against his amp to create an incredibly loud, I wouldn't call it irritating because when he did it sounded very good, but it's a very unique, characteristic sound. I'll give you an example. One of Hendrix's most iconic moments at Monterey was his choice to literally ignite his guitar on fire at the end of Wild Thing. The destruction of his own musical equipment created like a multitude of audience reactions. Some of them were really positive because he threw little bits of his broken guitar into the audience. People were happy because they were catching it. But another reaction was complete shock and almost like just pandemonium amongst the audience. But regardless of what happened specifically at Monterey, the very act in and of itself skyrocketed Hendrix's popularity in the United States. Which brings us to one of the most crucial festivals in the rise of the counterculture and the hippie movement, Woodstock. Woodstock was a music festival held in White Lake, New York in 1969. Woodstock featured Jimi Hendrix as one of the performers, and one of the most, in my opinion, iconic moments from Woodstock was Hendrix's playing of Voodoo Child. He played it on Monday, August 18th of 69, and his use of the wah-wah pedal and overall musicianship, Hendrix was known for sometimes performing when he was under the influence of a lot of drugs, and oftentimes that messed up his performance. Woodstock was incredible because his musicianship was completely on point, and everyone in the audience viewed this moment as one that was unforgettable, and tons of live recordings of this came out later. Voodoo Child. After Woodstock, it seemed like the hippie movement was literally unstoppable, and the message of peace, love, could really be successfully promoted through the music and through the festivals. and that was pretty much the consensus around America. That changed when essentially Altamont happened. And Altamont was a festival that was supposed to be the Western equivalent of Woodstock, but unfortunately it was subject to incredible violence, and the festival went in infamy because the Hells Angels security were contracted to work there, and their over aggressive behavior just created riots and complete chaos. It resulted in tons and tons, or I think at least 200 people were hurt, and I know three were dead for sure. But it turned into a day that lived in infamy for the hippies, the counterculture, and the music.